Okay, this is a decent sized picture. You can't see everything in here of the quilt, and I'll just kind of give you a little overview as to how I quilted it. In the center part here, where all of the pieced blocks are, I just did an all over meander design. They were very intricately pieced blocks, and I just didn't really feel like spending the time to go through and custom quilt each one and coming up with a different plan. So this was just an all over meander design throughout this area. In these areas here, I did do this, what I call like a worm design, where I just kind of go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They're probably about 1/4 inch apart lines, and then I filled that in and just kept traveling along and did all those setting triangles very similarly like that. After I had this inside part all done, I did take my walking foot and did do like a stitch in the ditch here just to kind of hold everything down. I really wasn't sure if I was going to put something in the white area, but I did go ahead and fill that in when I had all the quilting done. I decided to put something in. But I did do a walking foot straight line quilt in the ditch all the way both sides of this white. And then in the video I showed these parts here of the large half square triangle where I do this L loopy shape just to fill in the light colors of the half square triangles, and I did that in all of the large triangle setting blocks. And here I was able to just keep traveling. I did break a thread quite a bit just because I did have different colors of thread in the quilt, and also I didn't really want to do a bunch of traveling lines on the back. In the piece blocks here on the corners, again I did an all over meander, and as well as the blocks in the center part here, these were an all over meander design. These three here, and then along the other sides as well. And this area I did the worms again, but I kind of split these blocks in half, and so I did like this triangle part, and then I came up and went a different direction and went back and forth that way, and I finished all the blocks around there like that as well. So that's the general path that I took in quilting this quilt.
Okay, I'm going to do some free motion quilting on my quilt, and I'm in this white triangle part of the half square triangle. I have already stitched this section, and how I did this was just like, I call it little worms, back and forth lines that meet in the center and then start over again here, and I can do a close-up of that. And here I'm just doing loops, and I'm trying to get about 5 loops in, a bigger loop, and then follow it out with 5 more loops along this side to complete it. So let's see if we can do that here. So I'm going to pull up my threads, a few stitches to just lock it in place, kind of smooth it out, and here we go. And I'm just going to finish off my thread there. I'm going to cut those ends. Well, let's see. There it is. Okay, and then I don't know if you can see that there. Then we've got the loops that just go up and fill in the whole part of that triangle. So I'm just going through each of the light background sections in my quilt and doing that all the way around. Here's some threads from before. I can trim those. Okay, and then I'm used to working in a direction, you know, where it's more straight at me. So I'm going to turn my quilt, and I have it suspended on a rack here. And I'm going to see now if I can adjust this to show the rack. Okay, this is the setup that I have. I have kind of a small workspace here. I have pulled my table away from the wall about 2 feet or so. I have a garment rack here that you can see. Sorry about the glare on the lights. And then I've just taken some bungee cords over the bar with some clamps on it, and then I clamp my quilt ends that are hanging here. I bring those up so that I'm not fighting any weight or drag that happens when the quilt hangs over the side. So I do have to adjust it frequently, and I'm fine with that because it makes a huge difference. You don't have a lot of pull on your neck, your back, your shoulders. It does make it easier for the quilt to, you know, move through. So I'll do a little bit of changing here. And okay, so I'm pretty much just turning the quilt sideways again. And then I do still have some in my lap. And that's fine. Okay. And push that through a little bit. And I might slide these back so it gives me room to see what I'm working on. Okay. So once it's adjusted, I can do, you know, a good section of the quilt there. So I'm going to go ahead and just keep quilting. And I really just am concerned about the area that is within my hands. This is where the needle is. That's where the stitches are happening. I don't have to worry about everything else that's going on over here. It's secure. It's out of my way. I can move this freely. And that's the area that I'm focused on. So again, I'm just going to pull up my threads, a few stitches, and then quilt this section. I'm going to trim these threads. And then adjust as needed and just keep on stitching. And I've got that one done, and so I'm going to break threads. Put those, and now I'm kind of at the corner, and so I'm going to be able to go all along this one and then go right into the next one. So I'll be able to do 2 of the sections. along this path without having to rethread. But since I have changed my thread color, I don't really want to, you know, like travel along to a spot because it's quite a ways over. I want to start in the, you know, upper part of my triangle each time. So I've just chosen to break threads and it's working out just fine. So. Okay. And cut my threads. And then now I get to skip way down here and it's not really in a good position, so I will rotate the quilt again. So I'll show you that one more time on this system that I have. And you kind of drop the whole thing, get this kind of where I want it, and then I can hang it. Okay, let's see if that's going to work. And I think that's going to work out just fine. And I'm just kind of squishing this part of the quilt into this upper part of my bed here. I'm just making sure that my backing fabric that is overhanging the part of the quilt, my handles kind of is what I use them for, but I want to make sure I can see that and it's out of the way so that it's not folded under and then getting stitched into the quilting on the back side of the quilt. So as long as I make sure that's out, and then I'm just going to keep on going. I'm going to clip some threads here. And I have found that the spray basting works the best for me, and I have videos that show how I spray baste the quilts, but I'm not stopping to take out pins or do any kind of maneuvering around pins that I have. It is all spray basted. Sometimes I do pin the very edges, but this one seemed to stick really good, so I didn't even worry about putting pins in it. And so far, the underside fabric hasn't shifted or anything. I will check it after, you know, every little bit. I'll take it out and just make sure that the backing is, you know, not tucked under or bunched up or anything like that. Okay, and then I can take it out and clip my threads. And then just keep going. So the main thing that I have found that works is, you know, stopping often, reposition as needed, get it set up where it's comfortable before I start. It is okay as I'm going through if I have to move my hands to stop. I usually have my needle in the down position when I stop, and then I can make slight adjustments and then pick up again. Now this, I'm kind of doing a lowercase cursive L, just loops like that. So I have found that it's probably best not to move my hands when I'm in the upper part of the loop, but rather when I'm down here at the bottom, it just looks a little bit better if I don't have a jag in my loop part. This part down here seems to be a little flatter at the bottom of my L's, so that's where I try to make adjustments as needed. But stopping frequently, readjusting, this is the process that I do to quilt all the quilts on my domestic sewing machine. It's what I have, and I just kind of make what I have work, and this seems to be doing okay, and I've been able to get a lot of quilts quilted this way. And there we have it. I'll clip these threads, and then we can take a look at the back side and see what I have left to do. Okay, we're going to see if you can see some of this. The thread blends in. This is like a tan background fabric, but the thread that I used is a white bobbin. And you can see here where I've done these lowercase L's in this part of the half square triangle, and then in this part I did little worms where I just go back and forth. I kind of divided that triangle in half and went this direction and then came back and went this direction, so it made like a secondary design. So each of these larger half square triangle units I've broken up into 3 parts and quilted them a little bit differently. And then we can move it down and you can see the same thing. This is the half square triangle next to it. And then in the blocks where I have all my piecing, I just did a overall meander design. The blocks are pretty busy, and I didn't really want to spend a lot of time custom quilting every single one, so I just used a overall meander, and I think it looks really nice. You really can't see it that much. I didn't want to take away from all the piecing in the blocks. So by looking at the back side, I can tell the areas that I have not quilted. So I know I have to go around this side of the quilt yet. And, oh, sorry. This part here, you can see is unquilted. So I'm not quite done. I got excited thinking that I might be towards the end, but really I'm not. So I'm just going to keep on going. And then in the middle, I did lots more meandering just because the quilt is really busy, the quilting on the top, so you don't really see it. But I will show you, I wanted to use a thread color that was a little bit different, so I'm going to flip this over. And show some of the front of it here. Okay. Maybe you'll be able to see that. There is a lot of piecing going on with these blocks. There's not a sashing, so they all just kind of work together in there. And I did choose a kind of an orange. It's called Cantaloupe. And that's this color here, was super fun. That color is used in some of the blocks, but I just really like how it blended with all the rest of it. Just very springy and fun. And even when it showed up on the lighter areas, I think it still blended really well. So I used that cantaloupe on the blocks where it's pieced, and then with my little worm shape that I went back and forth in on all the setting triangles and in the half square triangles. And then the white part is where I switched over to white. I haven't decided yet if I'm going to do any quilting in this white sashing. I kind of like an area that's not quilted just because it gives it a poofy effect going around the quilt. So I have to decide that yet. But what I did do is with my walking foot, I did kind of a stitch in the ditch. So on the back side of the quilt, you can tell where that sashing would be. And then I just used a white bobbin on the rest of it. So
okay, I did decide to do some quilting within the white sashing, and what I did do was a ribbon candy design. So I kind of just went like this and throughout the whole thing. And then when I got to the corner, I kind of did like a transition where I could turn easy. And I think, I don't know if you can see it very well, I just kind of went like this and then back down and went up and then continued back into the ribbon candy to finish that off all the way around. So it did add a lot more texture. I was glad I went ahead and did it. And then I had a small border that I added to the end of the quilt. Is like 1.5 inches, and I really like to add a border, especially where there's lots of seams along these edges. It kind of just locks everything in place and gives me a smooth area to put a binding. If I was to bind over all of these seams, it gets really bumpy, and plus you lose your points and all that stuff. So I do kind of do like this floating border, and in this area I went ahead with the walking foot and just stitched straight lines about 1/4 inch apart. And it's really hard to see with that, but they just kind of followed right along, and I think there's 4 lines in there just to hold everything in place and just give it a little bit more of a texture to finish that off.